How'd Brer Rabbit get away, Uncle Remus?
Who say he get away?
Brer Rabbit always gets away.
Don't you be too sure. Ain't I done told you that Brer Rabbit being little without much strength, he's supposed to use his head instead of his foot.
Did he? Sure he did.
Now who's telling this here tale?
You are?
Then you just sit and do the listening.
Welcome back to Vox Popcast, the weekly pseudo-academic roundtable of pop culture analysis with drinking and swearing. My name is Christopher Maverick, but you can call me Mav, and I am once again here with my co-hosts, Wayne and Katya and Hannah. How's it going, guys?
I feel like it's a very loaded question.
Yeah. As well as we can.
I don't know how to respond anymore.
Yeah. I mean, this is a fun week show, though. This is not one of the series week shows. We had a series show last week.
I don't know about that. If it's totally fun.
It can be serious.
Okay, it's not about the world being literally on fire.
So we're not talking about people actively dying in the streets today. I think we'll be a little serious and silly. That's most of our shows.
Yeah.
You know, we're gonna have some good stuff. But before we get into it, I just want to point out, because I don't know if anybody else watched it. I expect Hannah did. Did anybody yet watch, the return of sports in the form of marbles?
Yeah.
Marble League's out.
You lost me.
Oh, Marble League. You don't know about Marble League? Marble League is awesome.
It is the kind of sport you would enjoy because it's delightfully whimsical and magic.
Yes. Yeah. You really, well, we'll have to send you to it.
It's not people competing with bears, so I'm not interested.
No, it's marbles competing with marbles. They race.
Yeah.
They have long jump competitions. They have balance beam competitions. Marbles.
Yeah, like John Oliver saved the league. It's great.
Yeah, they were having it's a YouTube channel that was having financial problems, and John Oliver's like, "We'll give you money. This must continue." And it's amazing. Yeah. And there's commentators who take it completely seriously and talk about like the lives of the marbles that are competing and their training regimens. It's
the
so
lives of the marbles?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
It'll be linked in the show notes because of course it will.
The best part of this is that
I'm not even sure if I understand how to process this information. I don't know if I have an opinion because I don't know.
You would love it.
You would love it. Like
next week's show, you're gonna be like, oh my god, I watched Marble League. This is amazing.
Look, if you're not watching Marble League this summer, I don't know what you're doing.
But yeah,
considering the amount of weird Twitch channels and other stuff that I watch, this seems about as normal as those. So
yeah, but this is think of the joy of Twitch, but with more competition and less people.
And also in the terms of sports,
I do enjoy less people.
Yeah. Think about the excitement and thrill of sporting, but no players are getting sick because of COVID and the greed of universities and other leagues.
Mm-hmm. Though there was on this week's Marble League, there was a tragic track accident where one of the marbles was injured.
Anyway, this is not what the show is about.
I really wish you guys could just see my face right now, because this is one of the few times in my life that I literally have my jaws dropped and I can't entirely process information.
It's going to be fine until somebody leaves a noose in one of the marbles' lockers.
Oh, God. Damn. See, this was supposed to be a fun show. You just had to bring up the real life. Oh, okay. God. Anyway.
Why can't we just let them have marbles?
Yeah.
Anyway, maybe
That's why we can't have nice things, Wayne.
Maybe we'll do a show about the marbles, but that is not this week's episode.
And we won't invite Wayne.
Oh, now it's a downer. Anyway, today's show is about Disney censorship, and you've just now I'm in a bad mood. No. Okay, so today's show, this was weird because literally I had the idea for this show 4 weeks ago when I saw an article about Disney Plus. The heading of the article was Disney Plus censoring cleavage on Wizards of Waverly Place. And I never really watched that show, but my thought was, well, I know Selena Gomez starred on that show. when she was like 14 or 15. So I thought probably she was wearing a bikini or something, and they decided she's too sexy for a 15-year-old after the fact. I mean, she's like 25 or 30 now or whatever, but they after the fact decided that, and that's what they did. No, they censored the cleavage of the woman who plays her mother. And by cleavage, I don't mean breasts. I mean literally the line of nothing that is between two breasts in a completely work appropriate shirt. And it's like, this is weird. And I thought we should do a show on this. And then literally the next day, George Floyd was murdered. And that kind of, took precedence for our entire schedule for a while. So like this went on the back burner. And I'm kind of glad it did, because the people who are like Wizards of Waverly Place devotees, which is apparently a thing, they continued to research it, and they found like old original VHS tapes of when it originally aired and stuff. And apparently it was always censored. It's not just for Disney Plus. And I thought, well, that's weird. And then somebody said, yeah, but it's odd because it's censored in that scene, but not in the scene immediately preceding it. So then I'm like, OK, now I have to watch the episode. And I have, and I don't know anything about this show. So I'm literally just watching the episode to look at the mom's boobs, which is creepy and weird in and of itself. But, research. And it is weird because
research is often creepy and weird, surprisingly.
Yeah. I'm making a lot of faces right now.
Yeah, but it is weird because she's like, it's not. And again, this is not a sexualized thing. It's not like she's wearing lingerie. It's not, it's literally a woman wearing a completely normal. I don't know what she does for a living in the show because I wasn't paying that much attention, but she could be a banker. It's the kind of top that one would wear to work. And it's censored only for one scene. She's wearing the same top in the scene before and the scene immediately after. And then it's not censored. And I'm like, what the hell is going on here?
So just since I haven't seen this, the censorship is what? Just blurring out the cleavage? Is just like a blurry spot? Like
there is a floating blur in front of her chest.
Like a logo on somebody's hat, right?
Yes, that's exactly how it is.
Okay.
And it's very, very obvious once you see it. You're like, that's weird. It's weirdly obvious once you see it.
I was gonna say, as someone who actually watched the show, because my sister was younger than me, so it was on the Disney Channel, and so it was kind of like to her what Lizzie McGuire was to me.
That makes sense.
The Russo family, the character in question is Teresa Russo, own a sub shop. Anyway, if you guys are wondering, do they know anything about Wizards of Waverly Place? One of us kind of does. I actually spent a weekend in college watching the movie with some of my friends, my freshman year. I don't know. It's fine, but it's all shows on the Disney Channel, or I guess Disney Plus now, because when we originally pitched the show, I said we should just talk about how weird Disney Plus is. For example, Disney, I guess they're inheriting things from the Disney Channel. Disney Channel did a sequel series, Boy Meets World, and I grew up with Boy Meets World, and they actually tackled very serious issues on Mav, your favorite thing, the very special episode.
Yes, I've seen Girl Meets World a couple times, and I thought for what it was very well done.
It's actually a pretty delightful show. That I, from what I've seen, I haven't watched the whole thing, but they never even actual people behind the scenes did complain a bit that Disney did not want to tackle some of the issues that Boy Meets World did, and the characters never had the chance to go to college in the same way Corey and Sean and Topanga do. And then Disney Plus also moved the Love, Simon sequel to Hulu. It's now on Hulu, and that also by the reviews that I read of the show, which is called Love, Victor, said that the storylines aren't very adult. It's pretty simplistic, even if it's well done. They also have, I guess it's just in limbo, partially because of the coronavirus, partially because of creative differences. Part of the reason I asked for Disney Plus was because there was a Lizzie McGuire sequel series coming out, and Disney was
not anymore.
Disney was no, we must change this because there's an implication that Lizzie's fiance is cheating on her. And Disney can't refer to sex.
Yeah, I know some stuff about that. That there was some news about that this weekend. She being Hilary Duff, who played Lizzie McGuire back in the day, was supposed to return for the sequel and will have a producer credit. She is aggressively. Right now it's not going to happen. Right now it's not going to happen on Disney because she can't come to terms with them, and she is aggressively courting the show for Hulu.
Right.
Because her issue was it wasn't even just the cheating one. They wanted this to be, in their mind, we're going to reproduce the show that we had done 20 years ago with with a now adult Hilary Duff, a now adult Lizzie McGuire. And, it'll be quirky and silly. And Hilary Duff, and in her mind, she was like, let's revisit this character 15, 20 years later and see who she is. And so she wanted to deal with the kinds of problems that a 30-year-old woman would deal with. And they're like, no, you should be worried about kissing a boy.
Honestly makes more sense.
She's like,
considering everyone who grew up with that show is my age.
Right. That's exactly her point.
Kids, the people who normally watch Disney shows won't care.
They don't know who Hilary Duff is. It's not like she's been in the public. Well, she's working, but it's not like she's famous like she was when she was 15.
And the people that watch her actual work right now are people our age and older. So late 20s plus, because that's the kind of work she's doing. It's TV series younger. That's who that's geared toward. And then I guess the weirdest censorship of all on Disney Plus involves Splash. Mav.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that was weird. I went through and I watched that too. And it's just bizarre. So Disney, and I understand where they're coming from. They want to be completely kid appropriate, or at least that's what they say. So they've gone through and, she's naked a lot in that movie. She's not raunchily naked, but she plays a mermaid. And unlike in The Little Mermaid, where she's a mermaid and they have who wears a seashell bra for no apparent reason, she's just a mermaid and she's naked. And they gave her long hair, which mostly falls in front of her chest and her butt most of the time. And there's one scene where she kisses Tom Hanks is the male lead. Daryl Hannah's the female lead. And Daryl Hannah kisses Tom Hanks and then runs and jumps in the water. And as she's running away, you don't see anything, but she's got long hair that's covering, it's her back. So you don't see, there's no frontal nudity in the shot at all. It's covering her butt. Her hair is long enough. It comes down to her butt, and she jumps in the water and swims away. Well, they felt as though there was too much butt cheek showing. So they've extended her hair with, again, what I will generously call CGI, but I'm being very generous by they have badly photoshopped extra hair so that her hair is now wider than her hips even, and it just sort of bounds away behind her with the level of graphics that was on your Super Nintendo 20 years ago. It's real bad. It's real bad and blocky and fake
and
looking.
Draws attention to her butt.
Yes. And you go, why was this done? And now I also watched more of the movie than just that scene. And I pulled, because I have movies. So I pulled the original copy of Splash, which I have. And they did cut other stuff. There are other scenes where she's nude, and they did stuff if you see her breast, they crop the shot so it was just her head. And I'm fine with that. That actually doesn't affect my enjoyment of the film at all. They cut out scenes of nudity that were really, really brief, and it didn't matter. Or there's a point where so in this version of a mermaid, when she comes out of the water, she grows legs. She's only got the tail when she's in the water. So she comes out of the water and she's walking up on the beach. And there's a scene where she's walking across the beach naked for 2 seconds. And instead, they just focus on just her legs. And that's fine. That works out just fine. And I'm fine with all those edits. And then the very odd part is at the very end of the movie, the bad guys are trying to catch her while she and Tom Hanks are struggling to get away, and they jump in the water and they're running away, and they're struggling and fighting. So you just see her breasts for 10 seconds because there's just nothing they could do. She's, it's a fight and she's naked. And so sometimes there's boob there. And so it's really inconsistent. And I guess they're trying to just stop kids from seeing nudity at all. But because it's so haphazard in this movie, why bother doing any of it?
Well, the thing that just, I guess, bothers me about this is that not only are they wildly inconsistent when it comes to splash, they're just wildly inconsistent in general about like what they're editing, what they're not. Not that I'm trying to give Disney Plus ideas, but I watched 10 Things I Hate About You on Disney Plus, which I'm so happy that's there. It's worth the entire subscription for me. Love the movie. I have seen versions of that movie on like cable edited because there's a guidance counselor played by Allison Janney who spends all of her time writing a romance novel. So there's like a lot of jokes about quivering members and such. At one point, Julia Stiles, you don't really see anything, but she flashes her teacher to distract him so Heath Ledger can escape. And of course, there's, tons of like partying and drinking and talks about sex that Disney won't allow on like any of their actual products. So it's like, what are you doing, Disney Plus? You were very strange. Also, there. So
do they allow it in that? Yeah, is the film in there in its entirety?
Yeah, it's unedited as far as I can tell. And I'm basing this on the fact that I kind of like worn out my DVD when I was in high school. And I've seen it many times, but like swear words are there. Dirty, like bad porn writing is there. Flashing is there. I mean, you can't really do anything about the drinking without cutting out like context for the movie. But yeah, it's weird. It seems to have survived in its entirety.
Brand new Marvel movies are there in their entirety, and they don't have nudity, but there's swearing, and obviously a lot of violence and implied sex, or implied sex, or like
the character of Iron Man exists.
Yes.
Also, they're producing like The Mandalorian, which is not about sex really, but violence. I mean, we always have that like stupid dichotomy in this country about sex versus violence and what gets an R rating and what doesn't.
Yeah, so it is weirdly inconsistent, and and I just like, even to go back to the Wizards of Waverly Place thing, I don't know. I mean, I on the blog I posted 2 pictures from that episode, one where she's blurred out, and another like literally 2.5 minutes later, she's wearing the same outfit and she's leaning over and you can see down her shirt. Not in a bad way, not like in a like she looks like a 40-year-old woman who has on a V-neck shirt. Like that's about how much you see. So my only guess is maybe in the scene where they blurred it, maybe her bra was showing. I mean, I can't tell because there's a blur there. So I was guessing maybe her bra showed and they were just like, women can't have bras. Think of the children. That's I can't come up with any other reason why you would do it. I just, nothing makes sense. But now I can't unsee it because once they call attention to it, it sticks out so much when
Right. You would even if her bra was showing, you probably would have never have noticed until they put a giant weird patch of blur over it. And then you're like, boobs. Yes.
Yeah. That's exactly how it is. And it's just like, and the episode, by the way, for the plot of, again, I don't know, Hannah, you've seen the show. I don't know how sexual the show ever is. But this episode is about the parents are fighting. And so the kids are trying to get them to fall back in love they have summoned, I guess, a demon fairy spirit baby that is Cupid. And so the plot of the episode nebulously is that the kids are, and they never use the term, but they're trying to get their parents to fuck. That's like what it's about. Like they're just like literally like having this fairy baby shoot arrows at them and trying to get them to fall back in love. And like, that's the implication, is that they want their parents to hook up. So it's already got that message, to where it's like where you're willing to go the extra mile. I mean, you're willing to go as far as saying, hey, we're going to use love magic, which has all kinds of rapey connotations anyway, but you're not willing to show a V-neck. And it's just bizarre. I have no idea what to do with it, because it's the fact that it's in that one scene. Just I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, look, the thing I remember most about that show is I discovered there was a corner on the internet where certain fans were very into like the brother-sister relationship, and that's when I backed out. The
slash.
This is
Yeah.
This is the stuff I'm much more concerned about the fan internet when it comes to like stuff like creepy stuff that I am on what ends up on Disney.
I mean,
like Tumblr has its horrifying corners.
I mean, you don't have to go as far as Tumblr, really, but
nope.
But yeah, like anytime anyone says to me that Game of Thrones is special because they like have incest, I just look at all of literature forever, and I'm like,
yeah,
really?
right.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
But I said this, I think, on our episode about like what parents should let their kids watch, and I again say I am not a parent, but is sex really the worst thing? Shouldn't we be concerned about like really negative stereotypes?
I mean, in this case, it isn't even just sex. It's literally a woman's breast, and like the idea that's like, I mean, like Mav's point to like we are now paying more attention to this person's breasts because they blurted out. It's like it's not even necessarily about like the act of sex, which is like I agree. It's like this is maybe not the biggest concern I have, but it's also just deciding that like, I mean, this is an issue that goes to like censorship in schools, and like the amount that girls get told you can't wear X, Y, and Z, despite the fact that oftentimes like boys can get away with wearing things that show similar areas of the body. Like there were guys in my gym class that would walk around shirtless. So like this entire thing was
we still did shirts and skins when I was in high school.
So do we.
I mean,
right,
like
absolutely.
And for us fat kids, that was horrible.
So like the entire premise that somehow like this woman's like perfectly normal, like fairly conservative shirt
should be censored.
Not even like they're actually sexualizing something that wasn't explicitly sexual that no one would have noticed.
Yeah.
I would even challenge the creepy parts of the internet to have made that particular screenshot into something salacious.
Oh, right. I was thinking more about like Lizzie McGuire, but yes, I remember being remember being in high school and being told that I could not wear my 2-piece swimsuit, even if it was like not a bikini, but like a tankini, I guess, and just like covered everything because it was too sexual.
I mean, there's instances where girls showing like their arms. It's like and I think even, I mean, I didn't watch a lot of Lizzie McGuire growing up. Haven't been following the new show, so you probably know better than I do. But like even that also just shies away, I think, from just like women in a different way. It's in one case we're like basically talking about like women's bodies are unacceptable, but another way it's like we're talking about like Disney's basically saying like we're not going to deal with any adult topics whatsoever because they're hard and they might corrupt children's brains. And it's like, at what point, especially because like I remember Lizzie McGuire being a show that was like, it wasn't like a little kid show. It was like a preteen show.
Exactly.
It was your generation's version of Saved by the Bell for us and Wizards of Waverly Place for Hannah's sister. Yeah.
Right. And it's like, which in some ways it's like, I actually think that that's a show that should, I mean, the reboot is a different thing because it's like, to me, it makes most sense to pitch that as adults who grew up with the original Lizzie McGuire. So that's aside.
Like the reboot of Gilmore Girls, which was not for 20-somethings. It was for 30-somethings because.
Right. No, exactly. Yeah. And it's like, but I would expect a show for preteens to actually start dealing with adult issues because that is like, and maybe not doing them in the same way you would in like media made for adults, obviously. But it's like, and it's not that, and I don't remember that being that unusual. Like, I remember watching like That's So Raven, like would talk about like sexism and racism in like kiddie terms, like admittedly, but like it would address stuff like that. So it's like the idea that basically we have to protect children from everything on the planet to me is frankly kind of asinine.
So I wasn't watching Lizzie McGuire because I was a little too old. But when I was a teenager, preteen and teenager, we had Saved by the Bell. And Saved by the Bell famously has the drug episode where Jesse is on caffeine pills, but really speed because they wouldn't allow them. And, so that's a teenage show or a preteen show, but it's trying to deal with the serious issue. There's a drug issue of family ties back in the day. There always have been those things. And it is weird to try and protect. The protection by pretending something's there is weird enough. The protection by erasing it.
There was the episode of Different Strokes where they implied that
molested.
The molestation by the Maytag man.
Yes. Yeah. There was an episode of which was, I mean, that was late 70s, early 80s. And that's a really heavy episode.
That's a heavy episode for that.
And it's weird. That's, the very special episode, but it's real dark because it is unequivocally unequivocally Arnold is sexually molested by, or is it Arnold, or is it one of the? I can't remember which kid it was. I think it was Arnold. It might have been. It might have been Dudley.
One of his friends.
Kid. Well, but yeah. Anyway, but the kid is clearly and absolutely molested by an adult, not played for laughs, played very seriously. And it is like, yeah, this kid just got raped and they dealt with it. And then it's a very special episode. So it's never mentioned again.
Never mentioned again. Right.
Which is odd. But, there's no trauma. It's traumatic for that episode. There's no laugh track. There's no, it's just this is really bad. So if somebody does this to you, tell somebody is the point of the episode, which is great.
That's the one that comes to mind. I seem to remember various sitcoms of that era doing that kind of episode once a season or something. Something that dealt with genuine issues. I mean, kind of big issues like that.
Or if you're Blossom like 7 times a season.
Today, right.
Today on a very special Blossom.
Yeah. But like drug abuse or alcoholism or abuse or whatever. What was the show that Michael J. Fox was on?
Family Ties.
Family Ties. And Tom Hanks was like the drug addicted uncle who showed up once in a while. Yeah, kind of thing. And those episodes would be very special. The censorship thing, being in this world where we have a million channels and stuff we've had HBO for 40 years or whatever it is. But the censorship of moving stuff from theater movies, theatrical release to TV is nothing new. That was regular. Like the ABC movie of the week in the 1970s always started with a disclaimer that this film has been modified from its theatrical release. And they would cut out, nipples and swear words and that sort of thing. And the one that comes to mind for me is I remember seeing Cabaret, the Liza Minnelli Cabaret on television, and watching that as an adult. I have 20 minutes long? Yeah, apparently all I saw were the musical numbers.
Yeah,
because everything else in that movie is gay people and abortion. So just as a story, it had to have been incomprehensible. But the TV version, that just had to have been nothing but the musical numbers, and that's it, and probably not all of them. So this whole. We must protect the public. And with that, there was FCC stuff of what you get away with on network TV, and there are only 3 channels. And if you wanted your theatrical release to be seen on TV, that was the only option. But then HBO happened and all that other stuff. And suddenly you could see nipples if you wanted to.
I was actually talking about this with my mother just to see if she could think of any of them. And this is, she said the same thing as you. She remembers the TV edits from movies of which, are often really, really gratuitously bad dubs of lines. My favorite, which is in an old movie, but it's it's old now, but if you've ever seen the TV edit of Snakes on a Plane, which Snakes on a Plane, the movie of which Samuel L. Jackson says he only did because he wanted to say the line, "I have had it with these motherfucking snakes on this motherfucking plane," is in the TV edit.
Like fair.
Yeah, in the TV edit, it is literally, "I have had it with these monkey fighting snakes on this Monday to Friday plane."
What?
No one knows what that means.
That doesn't even make sense.
That's great. That's great.
Why?
Well, because FCC wouldn't let them say fuck.
Yeah.
So
I know, but why Monday to Friday? I don't.
There was an entire committee of people who spent a week coming up with the best dub for that. And,
guaranteed.
And that's what they settled on.
I don't understand why it's monkey fighting and Monday through Friday. Like, there's no, they couldn't just use the same,
Yeah, it's funnier if you say monkey fighting twice.
Yeah.
Right.
In terms of books, this has been happening for a while. Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None had a different title originally before it was reprinted in the U.S. in 1940.
I guess this is not the black episode that I did a couple weeks ago, so we'll just say it had the N-word in it.
It was named after a minstrel song.
Yes, 10 little N-words is what it used to be called.
Yeah, and actually Duke Library has a copy that has the original language preserved in its archives. So they also changed the text of the song that is a major plot point in the novel to 10 Little Indians.
Right. Which is what most people know that song as now, by the way. If the nursery rhyme that you said as a kid, 10 Little Indians, that nursery rhyme didn't start out that way.
The original lyrics of Yellow Rose of Texas, it's referring to a quote unquote high yellow woman. And there's a line in the original about the clothes those darkies wore. That's not in later versions of that song.
Yeah. So it's kind of weird though. Like I'm weirdly on the, I'm like Katya said, I think there's bigger problems than whether a kid sees a boob. I just
I mean, also by virtue of the fact that children exist, they probably have seen a boob. Yeah, it was probably their mother's, so they should probably calm down.
I'm sure there's an entire subreddit dedicated to the cleavage of Waverly Place. So
oh god, but I think Katya's right in that.
I don't want to find that. I just assume that if it pops into my head as an option, it probably exists.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
So I don't want to go looking for that.
But Katya is like originally whenever like you hear about Wizards of Waverly Place or the Splash thing and you see how like terribly it's done, it seems rather silly. But I think Katya is right to point to the greater like underlying effects that like this kind of censorship can have.
Well, because we talk about this all the time. It's like media is always, in this case, like we talk about like children's programming is somehow educational, even if that's not necessarily designed to be educational programming, because like kids learn from media as all people learn from media. And like, which I'm sure is part of what Disney's thought process is and not wanting to show boobs because good Lord, but in not showing boobs, like that doesn't remove the issue. It just means the stance being taken is different.
It means like, well, boobs are shameful. I mean, like you
right. You're saying like
aren't you ashamed constantly?
It's like women's bodies are not acceptable. And even, it'd be one thing. It's like if it's a case of like complete nudity, because generally speaking, we don't accept nude people in public except for in very specific circumstances. But the idea that it's like this middle-aged mom in like this normal blouse is like very weird. It's like that, saying that that's inappropriate.
To go back to the Lizzie McGuire thing, same thing, right? Because when she's, she's not even trying to, it's not like she's trying to do the porn version of Lizzie McGuire. That's not what she wants. She just wants to do a sitcom where a 30-something-year-old woman has 30-something-year-old women problems instead of, like I think she literally said in the quote, or she said something like, I'm not doing a show about, whether or not I want to kiss this boy. I'm 35. I have 2 children, like she's like, what do you like? That's not my life anymore. I'm not worried about whether I'm going to get punished for sneaking out. This is like, it doesn't make sense to do the show of what Lizzie McGuire is if she's just this emotionally stunted adult who's still having the problems from 20 years ago. So I get that.
And no one will watch that.
Yeah. Like,
yeah. Who's that for even?
Yeah. Like the younger fans who discovered it on Disney Plus probably will just watch the original episode because like people do gravitate toward, characters their own age.
Right.
And the people who are our age will be very angry that it's not good / ruining childhoods.
Or just won't even respond to it. Like it'll just no one will care.
Well, so and I do wonder. I know that they're bringing back Saved by the Bell, and I don't know what it's going to be, but it's going to try to. You have to update it because if it's the same show, I don't want to watch that show from before. The show from before, I've tried to watch as an adult and it's bad because I'm an adult now. Like even watching stuff nostalgically, I can laugh at it, but I know that like I wouldn't start watching this, I'm not going to start watching Wizards of Waverly Place now because I'm a grown up and I have no nostalgia for it because I didn't watch it as a kid. It's just like, this is dumb. And Disney has those shows now that I don't watch because I'm not 12, so I'm thinking, I like my nieces are very into, it's, I don't remember what it's called. The Descendants, I think it's called. There's shows about the children, the teenage children.
There were some graphic novel adaptations of that I special ordered for some people.
And it's not a show. It's
a series of movies. Yeah.
Original. Yeah. I don't know how I know that, but I don't know beyond that if they're worth watching.
I have seen them. I have seen them, when I'm hanging out with my 7-year-old niece and we've sat down and watched them together, because she was 7. It was like a 7-year-olds and a 12-year-old and, a couple of, 40 somethings because, I was babysitting and it's like, oh, this is what we're watching today. OK. And it was fine. And I would have found it funny if I were, 7 or 12.
But the question is, you don't want to cancel this like you want to cancel Paw Patrol?
No, it wasn't offensive like Paw Patrol. Paw Patrol was see last week's episode. Paw Patrol is a crime against God. This needs to go away. It's so bad.
Would you say that Paw Patrol is the worst show on television?
No, it's not the worst show on television. I've seen far worse programming, but it's just like I weep for our children if they are subjected to this. It was just like it was just. I mean,
it's more bad. I weep because there are children that enjoy it, and what does that say about the future?
I just assume children are stupid. But
see, this is the whole problem. If we're giving them media that teaches them that teaches them to be annoying, they will grow up to be annoying. If we give them media that teaches them that having breasts is shameful, and a generation of girls is going to grow up basically believing that they shouldn't have boobs.
But before we transition away from it, I want to ask.
I'm going to add some clips of the banana splits from my youth.
Oh God, I love banana splits. No. I love banana splits when I was a kid,
which probably explains a lot about me. But
yeah,
but moving on.
And what's the other one? The drugged out one.
HR Puffin stuff.
Oh my God,
Lidsville and the Bugaloos and any one of.
HR Puffin stuff only exists in order to teach 3-year-olds to do acid in the 70s.
Yeah.
There's no other explanation. You needed to be stoned in order to come up with that. But before we transition away from this too much, what is the alternative? I'm pretty sure I saw Splash. Splash came out when in 1984, and I saw it, and I was 10. And
look at you now.
Well, yeah. So what's the example? I mean, I'm a crazy person, but am I really so bad? Is it really because I saw Daryl Hannah's boobs when I was 10? Is that really
Also, to be fair, I'm pretty sure the first time most boys in one of my classes in middle school saw full frontal boobs on television was in our high school English class, because
Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. And the best part was our teacher, in an effort to censor it, tried to fast forward through the 3 seconds of boob and managed to pause and couldn't get it unpaused because apparently remotes are hard.
Seriously, our teacher walked out of the room at the wrong time, and it could have been other factors, but a very conservative student did not come back the next year.
I mean, the thing that I also think about, and I'm not a parent, and I'm obviously my experience growing up was different just because I was a kid right when the internet was becoming a thing. But the other thing is also most of these kids that are watching a lot of this TV have Facebook accounts. Mm-hmm. They're on the internet. They're on smartphones. They're on TikTok, which is also a very frightening media platform in some ways. Similar to Paw Patrol. Mm-hmm. It's Katya's Paw Patrol sometimes.
I think you're getting at they have access to actual porn.
Right. They have. I'm much more concerned about what kids see on the. I'd be much more concerned about talking to my children about what they see on the internet than about what they're going to see on what they're going to see on any given TV show. Right. Because censorship aside, all of these media companies have a vested interest in not pissing off parents if their target audience is children.
Right.
But the idea is I think part of it, and I kind of wonder if part of it is maybe I wasn't paying attention, but I don't remember this particular kind of censorship really seeing it all that much when I was a kid. And I wonder if there's this weird backlash of parents being paranoid about what their kids are being exposed to on a daily basis.
I think there was.
They can't control what their kids see on the internet. Therefore, they're controlling. There's a greater pressure to control what they see on TV.
I think there was, though. I think it's a different time, and there's obviously more media now because there is an internet, and there are literally, if you go on TV, there are 900 channels being streamed to your television. When I was a kid, I had 3, 4 if you count PBS, which, by the way, is where all the good nudity was. But like,
thank you, Benny Hill.
Yeah.
But I also watched like most of what I watched was like cartoons and like, which also like there is a, especially in 90s kids cartoons, there is a tradition of like scantily clad women.
Mm-hmm. Hello,
and
nurse.
Lots of large breasts. Because it's a cartoon and you can do things. Also, Ren and Stimpy was considered a children's cartoon when I was a kid, and then it showed up on Spike TV, and I was very confused as a child.
Yeah, Animaniacs has Hello Nurse, and and going back, Bugs Bunny was a horny bastard in like the 50s. Like, I mean, he really was.
There's a lot of cross dressing in Bugs Bunny, which like in another medium, like very conservative parents would freak out about. But it's like a rabbit, so it's fine. Like,
it's somehow because it's drawn, it's okay
at all. Clearly, I'm being very sarcastic.
But I mean, like, and the thing is, in all honesty, when I'm a kid growing up in the late 70s, early 80s, when I was 10 years old, 1984, Splash was not the first time that I'd seen a woman's boobs, even in a sexual context, like not breastfeeding. Like there was, like if you're an 8-year-old boy, this is just news for all parents out there. If you're somewhere between 8 and 12, your kid has a friend who, now has, a smartphone with porn on it. But back in the day, you had that friend who had porn buried in the woods. Wayne, you had that friend, right?
Oh,
There's the guy who knows where the porn in the woods is.
Woods porn is a thing.
Yeah, woods porn's totally a thing.
I guess we just grew up in a different time.
Well, you grew up in a time where there was an internet.
The internet happened.
Yeah, there's that one kid who stole the Playboy from his father and hid it under a rock up in this holler.
Right, and everybody knew where it was.
And next time you and your friends got on your bikes, you went to the woods porn.
Right, but see, now you don't need that because there's a kid who has a smartphone. Even if you don't let your kid have the smartphone, a kid has a smartphone. So basically, what I'm getting at is chill out over Daryl Hannah's butt. Like it's fine.
Right. Which, like, again, not a parent, but it seems to me like much more useful to have a conversation with your kids about media rather than trying to pretend that they can't access this stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, and because there's even like no matter how much you try and prevent them from like like you said, like they don't have a smartphone, maybe you like restrict their internet access, like kids will find it.
Yes, and always have.
Yeah, I guess like thinking about this conversation a lot, which I guess like might be a transition into other things.
The other half, yeah,
like Gone with the Wind, but like I've been thinking about what is good and bad teaching, even just like what is good and bad parenting in the abstract, because I don't know. But my parents, I think I said on the parent episode, my mother did not let me watch Disney's Pocahontas when it originally came out. And the reason why she did that is not because she hated Disney or Pocahontas, but because the storyline tells a romance between Pocahontas and John Smith, which she thought was historically inaccurate and thought perpetuated some harms and like racist myths about the founding of this country and the relationship between colonial settlers and Native Americans. So instead, she bought me a bunch of history books and made me learn about the real story of Pocahontas and how she had to change her name, was ripped away from her family. And you know what? It's really hard to enjoy the Disney movie, and especially its sequel after you know the actual story behind like Pocahontas.
See, and is it no? I mean, so I'm curious. Is it for you? Because for me, and this is going to transition. This is definitely transitioning into the other half of our topic. For me, it's not. And it's so I'm just for cultural context of when I grew up. I was born in 1974, which means that I watched Roots for the first time when I was 2 years old because Roots came out and my mother was like, we're watching this. And so Roots is a mini series for those who don't know, which is basically a very real look at slavery in the United States. And it was probably one of the most important things ever put on television. Certainly the most important thing put on television up until that point. And it changed like media in this country in a lot of ways. And my mom was like, well, I'm not missing this. And she lived with a 2-year-old because that's how old I was. And so she was like, I guess you're going to watch this with me. And we would watch it and we'd have very serious conversations about slavery every night for a week and a half while Roots was on. And that was my introduction to slavery as a kid. So to me, I was able to, I mean, I'm a weird kid as well. I'm the kid who grew up to be me. But like we had these real conversations about slavery, and yet, and I've said this on the show before, because we're going to start talking about Gone with the Wind. I actually do like the movie Gone with the Wind, despite knowing all of its problems. So I can enjoy it, even though, and I like Pocahontas, despite knowing it is nothing like what the real story of Pocahontas actually is. But I think that I don't personally think that you can't enjoy something if you are aware of the cultural context. I think if anything, it improves your enjoyment of it, for me, at least.
Yeah, Mav, I agree to a large extent. I think the issue, and I think, so for context, Hannah and I were both in TAing together in a film class in which Gone with the Wind was taught. And I think for me, and I've only ever seen Gone with the Wind or segments of it in some kind of educational context. It's never something I've was exposed to or sought out outside of that. Mm-hmm. So I think my issue with Gone with the Wind and kind of where it fits in this conversation is that when it's presented in an educational context, it very rarely, I think, is contextualized as, at least in my experience, it's never been contextualized as anything other than a extremely historic and historically important film. Mm-hmm. No one really talks about the racial implications. No one talks about the ways that the imagery has been used by white supremacist groups, etc. And so basically,
this was a film studies class?
Yes.
Okay.
This was yes. And it was an introduction. It was an introduction to film studies class, probably based off of the students that I encountered. Like many humanities introduction to humanities electives, it is probably the only time they will ever study film ever.
Right. This is non-majors. Non-majors, a lot of them.
A lot of non-majors.
Exactly. And I think that's where teaching these films, because to me that there's a difference between these films existing and being uncensored and being incorporated into educational curriculum.
We should point out the HBO thing before we go too farther down the for listeners who either didn't see it in the news when it was in the news the last couple of weeks, or are listening to this at some point in the distant future. 3 weeks ago now, as you listen to this or more, HBOMax, which is a streaming service, in the midst of all of the BLM protests, decided, they didn't just decide, they were pressured to by some media groups. They removed Gone with the Wind from the streaming service. And conservative media had a shitstorm over this. Oh, you're trying to erase the past and blah, blah, blah. Kayleigh McEnany, the White House press secretary, devoted a good 6 or 7 minutes of complaining about it during one of her press conferences. Oh, the liberals are trying to erase the past and everything. And HBO said, we're not removing the movie. We are taking it down from our streaming service. A streaming service, by the way, which is not doing that well. I have HBOMax. I like it a lot, but I'm a movie nerd. They haven't had the greatest signups in the world. They removed it and they said, we're going to bring this back once we've had time to film something that gives some cultural context to it. And people complained. It was gone for 2 fucking weeks. And let me tell you something. All right. Again, I like Gone with the Wind. Gone with the Wind, ignoring commercials, is 3 hours and 48 minutes long. Nobody watches fucking Gone with the Wind, okay? I'm a weird person. All the people who are complaining about they're trying to erase this history, you're not watching Gone with the Wind. You just aren't. It's not. They can tell. They know what the streaming numbers are. You weren't looking for it anyway. You're only complaining because it went away. And by it went away, it came back with, because I watched it last night, it came back with an intro segment by a woman who is a black film history professor and one of the hosts on Turner Classic Movies, which AT&T also owns, and she gives cultural context to it. And it airs before you watch the movie. It's 3 minutes and 16 seconds of just giving cultural context. And it's actually really, really well done. I don't know if we
can handle 3 minutes and 16 seconds of education, though.
I remember growing up.
I don't know if we can do that.
I remember
it's Masterpiece Theater.
Yeah, exactly. Here in Pittsburgh, we had Masterpiece Theater, and Reed Cordick would come on and introduce movies and give you historical context for them before you watch them.
For Spartacus. It's
exactly that.
It's exactly that. It's very well done. And she talks about both the good and the bad about it. She talks about the innovations in filmmaking. She talks about the controversy surrounding Hattie McDaniels winning her Oscar and having to sit alone because the Oscars were segregated. She talks about it and it's a very brief introduction. And she says, I encourage you to watch this film and then talk about the historical inaccuracies and do research. Here are some resources. And I think that's,
which is great.
For me, that makes movies better.
Yeah,
I'm a weirdo. But
whenever
it's also like, and that's the stuff that, like, when I was talking earlier about, like, when Hannah and I were in that class, that is the kind of stuff that really didn't appear in that class. There were some oblique references to it, and it showed in student papers. Like, I have never seen, I mean, Hannah, I don't know about the ones you saw, but, like, students were asked to basically write, like, short reflection papers, and it usually is just, like, students' response to the film, basically. You know, most teachers that are listening probably are familiar with the format here. And probably, like, I had never gotten a batch of papers on any other film or assignment where basically it was just, like, a string of, let's go with problematic racial assumptions and interpretations of the film, because they weren't taught how to respond to this film. And a bunch of 18-year-olds in 2 years ago, 3 years ago, so this would have been like 2017, have no idea how to respond to this film.
And, I think that, like, just as a side note, I think that actually a lot of people don't understand about academia and education in general, that even in the humanities where talking about race, gender, class is, like, extremely common, even the professors are not necessarily taught how to handle these issues in the classroom and how to, like, contextualize things. One, two, by the way, I
especially
always have angst about everything I ever enjoy. Because I am
You're a Victorian
guess,
scholar.
Well, yeah, but, like, the thing, I mean, yes, obviously, yes. But, like,
every book you read was written by someone who probably beat their wife. That's just how it is.
Well, I wouldn't
It's true.
say that. No. Well, I mean, obviously Charles Dickens literally tried to send his wife to an asylum so he could marry someone else.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, that's...
I mean, and, like, even, like, people who are, like, were, like, people like Olive Schreiner who are, like, try to do, like, some anti-racism, were feminists, also had their problems. Yes. Actually, for, like, not to sidetrack this into a Victorian conversation, but there's actually a really good essay by Carolyn Bedinsky in Victorian Literature and Culture called Casual Racism in Victorian Literature, kind of reflecting on how there's just casual racism that permeates Victorian literature, both, like, very specifically and also just in the background, because, as I have said, like, a billion times on this show, it was, like, the age of, like, the British Empire and therefore, that kind of contextualized everything. And she, like, thinks about how, like, faculty and students can, kind of look at that racism and think more deeply about what's taken for granted in our current moment. Because I think that part of the reason why I have angst about things that I like to watch in a very, like, sometimes I know annoying, like, moral philosopher way, The Good Place, is that, like, there it's just, like, there's so many, like, competing factors. Like, I really like, I think The Princess and the Frog as a movie is a well-made movie. Does it have, like, extreme problems in romanticizing the jazz age and focusing on, like, a black character while briefly referring to, like, Jim Crow, but not going into Jim Crow, and, like, making like the, like, white, like, rich people who, like, underemploy Tiana, the main character's mother, like, also, like, quote, good people. Like, I mean, like, it's all very complicated. Like, Pocahontas is complicated. Gone with the Wind is complicated.
Which is,
I mean, part of the reason why I hate Gone with the Wind, which you can hear more about on the Good Things We Hate episode, is because there is a lack of context. So if people see the South through the lens of Gone with the Wind, they all want their stupid plantation ways. Again, don't get married on plantation. And like try and romanticize the South in the same way that, like, we romanticize, like, the Austin country house, and we, like, just push away all the bad stuff. And bad stuff is, to put it just so lightly, death camps. And
I mean, I think this might actually be the first episode where we actually solve something, because I think basically the answer is just talk about your bloody media.
Yes.
Because, like, I mean, for, like, both the topics we've talked about, like, the answer is not, like, getting rid of this stuff. It's like, I mean, I think so many people, like, I guess we, like, both of you at this point, and I would include myself in this, have referenced that we are unusual watchers of media, and, like, Wayne, definitely as well. It's like, because we think critically about the media that we consume, and, like, having taught cultural studies for a long time, and I'm sure other folks have that similar experience, like, a lot of students come to my classroom for the first time, especially because I teach, like, pop culture and not books that are commonly taught in, their high school English class. They look at me like, wow, there's actually so much more to, like, movies, television, the books you read for fun. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, there is. And you should maybe think about it because of all of these things. And it's like, there is no such thing as a perfectly unflawed piece of media. It's not possible because there aren't perfectly unflawed humans.
It would be boring.
So it's like you just, it would be boring.
Unflawed media would mean that, okay, if there's no flaws, then there's no conflict. And why am I reading this story? What is the story?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
And
it's like, the answer is just
things like, I mean, Gone with the Wind, I saw, so long ago, well before I was a more conscious consumer of media.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever flaws there were, whatever cultural things there were, it was just part of the world I was growing up in. So at that time, I didn't think to question. I've seen scenes since then. I'm certainly aware of it. But, I mean, that was true. I saw Song in the South in the theater when I was a kid, and what was quite possibly the last time it was making the rounds. Mm-hmm. And, fun animation. Like at that point in my life, I knew nothing about.
Did you like it? Do you remember?
At the time, yeah, I did.
How old were you?
I probably 6 or 7.
Okay. I watched Song of the South again last night. Song of the South. Good luck finding it. Again, I'm a media scholar, so I have gone to deep, dark corners of the world and the dark web, and I have a copy of Song of the South that I keep for posterity, and and research. And I watched it again, and it's weird because I don't know, like the people who are against Song of the South, because Disney has done such a good job of erasing it.
Yeah.
I think people know that it's racist, but they don't know anything about what it's about. So they don't know what they're really complaining about. So no one really watches it. Like no one watches it and no one knows why they're upset. People just know that they're supposed to be upset about it. And what's interesting about, so for one thing, people think that Song of the South is, it's an antebellum pro-slavery narrative. It's not. It's a Reconstruction narrative. It takes place after slavery. It's Victorian America. It's like 1880s ish. And definitely the black people are not slaves. They are sharecroppers. Explicitly, it's never said, but that's a very different cultural context. And what the movie's actually about is it's actually extremely progressive, and it's about how wise this former slave is, but like it's completely missed.
And that's some of my memory of it. And let's say once again, I was a kid.
Yeah. And by the way, watching it in 2020, it is an extremely problematic view of race. Like it does come across as extremely racist and like sort of, oh, black people are stupid, except that he's also wise, and everybody is very happy to be a sharecropper.
I'm sure there's the magical Negro thing going on with him too. So
it is literally a story about a magical Negro.
Yeah, and I mean, most of my memories of it are the animated features, which I now know are Southern tales that
the Uncle Remus stories.
They're but most of them have their origin in African folklore, which certainly as a kid I had no idea of any of that sort of thing. So it was that adaptation of that stuff, or appropriation, however you want to look at it.
It's entirely appropriation.
Yeah,
it's real problem. But I mean, it's something nobody wants to talk about, and nobody can because Disney has absolutely erased it. I think Song of the South would be, and by the way, I don't think kids in 2020 would like it. The kids who like Paw Patrol are not going to watch this movie. It's real slow and real stupid to a 21st century child. Like they're going to think this is bad. And so I don't. Yeah. So like I don't like I think it's worth looking at and saying, OK, what are they trying to do here? It's trying to be very progressive about race relations, but it was being progressive about race relations, 60 years ago or whenever it came out. I should look up the year.
Right. And it came out in 46.
46. Yeah. So almost 70 years ago. And or over 70 years ago. I can't do math.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like a 70-year-old movie that's trying to be progressive. So it's very progressive for 1946 and not at all for 2020. It's weird. And I think that's a conversation worth having.
Yeah, and we've had that conversation about comics and different stuff that is progressive for its time and doesn't hold up real well now.
Mm-hmm. I go ahead, Wayne.
Go ahead.
I was just going to jump back to the Roots thing. I watched that as a mid-teen. I was in high school when that came out, and growing up in my all-white rural neighborhood holler, there were neighbors a mile or so away. That was an important narrative for me to experience. That's possibly the first hardback book I ever purchased. because the movie series moved me enough that I wanted to read the original. And see, that was an important narrative for me specifically, given where I was from, to experience, because it gave me a different perspective on all of that stuff than I'd had prior to that, based on prior media, Song of the South, etc.
I learned I learned about Song of the South and Gone with the Wind in a media studies class in my senior year of college. We didn't watch Song of the South besides, the clips that were still played for when I was a kid, like the Disney sing-alongs, like Zippity Doo Dah was included in that video, and I was like, where is this from? I've never seen this, and that's because Disney hid its quote unquote shame in a vault, locked away. And the professor, it's actually the exact opposite of what happened in the class Katya and I TA'd for, because the professor told us spent a lot of time laying out the culture of old Hollywood, segregated it was, how there were only for the most part there were very specific roles that Black actors could play. People like Hedda Hopper, who was a gossip columnist, spent a lot of time and energy into kind of perpetuating the racism of the Hollywood system. We talked about, the negative stereotypes and the, kind of catch Hattie McDaniel was in. And so that that put these kinds of movies into context for me. And we talked about in an educational setting. And we also talked about warnings about cultural insensitivity by Disney Plus in another episode, though I again say that's the most wishy-washy warning label on things like Birdie and the Bull I have ever seen. It's not even saying this was real bad. It's saying, well, you might be offended by this, probably.
May contain outdated cultural depictions. May? No, it does. Dumbo has it too.
And I think Song of the South is interesting because there are so many things that carry that warning, that even recent things that we've mentioned that Disney has not been super great on, or other studios. It's not just Disney, clearly. But they have kind of half erased Song of the South, and part of that is they are replacing the Splash Mountain ride with a Princess Tiana ride, which I think that is just the street there's so many politics wrapped up into that very specific replacement.
Well, you mean we're gonna go to the other Black movie, which is Princess of the Frog. Again, Princess of the Frog is a wonderful movie. It is the first time Disney has acknowledged the possibility of there being a Black princess, and good for them. And it's 2020 now. By 2040, people are going to look at that movie and go, this is racist as fuck.
Before the movie even came out, people were maybe you should not, in terms of name choice. I think occupation, just there was, even the way Tiana is portrayed in the original film and the way she's portrayed in Wreck-It Ralph 2, in terms of her hair specifically, it's already changed. So I just Disney, it's just they're erased. This has always been the case with most of the history of songs. They're trying to sort of just erase this blip in their history, and I think that actually they're not the only ones. I've been sending Mav, I think, for 2 weeks straight, since we were doing this episode, any mention of censorship into 30 Rock and The Office and Scrubs.
Scrubs and 30 Rock, Scrubs, and Community. They've all removed blackface episodes from their streaming and syndication packages in the last week as we tape this, which is and South Park has removed the Muhammad episodes from their streaming packages. And this is real weird. Well, South Park is at least, not serialized. It's just completely episodic. But Community and Scrubs and those and 30 Rock, those shows are very serialized. And it's just going to be kind of weird when there's just 5 episodes missing from it now.
And so I saw actually on Twitter a lot of people saying, actually, I don't want them to remove these because I think that insert creator like Tina Fey, like I think their shame should stand. I also saw like someone say that like, removing these episodes, like removing Song of the South, allows people to like, and I'm so sorry that I didn't catch who said this, that allows people to like fetishize like these like these shows and these movies that because they can't access them because you have to go through some very weird channels to find Song of the South. Or like VHS.
Yeah, you do, and that's where I'm at. I understand the problematic nature of blackface. Obviously, we talked about this again on the Black episode, the Black Friend is Tired episode. But here's where, and I'm not all black people, so people's opinions are going to vary here. I have a hard time saying, like, because I've seen people say the thing that Hannah just said, which was there's been a lot of, well, no, Tina Fey's shame should stand. And I think that's the problem because it's been presented to her, to white creators, as though you did something wrong. You should be very ashamed of it. And, she did something. It's a thing that she did. It's a thing she was trying. And yeah, she probably shouldn't be making more blackface sitcoms in 2020. And probably it wasn't the best idea to do in 2008 or whatever it was, but it happened. And I think erasing it in order to be okay is not the right solution. Talking about it is the right solution. I also think that there's a little bit of absolutism on the liberal side, my side, which I think is kind of unfair because, people like to say cancel culture is not a thing. Well, it is and it isn't. But I've heard people say stuff like there's no reason to ever do blackface ever. And Robert Downey Jr. should be ashamed of Tropic Thunder. And I say no on that one. Tropic Thunder is a movie about the ridiculousness of trying to do blackface. And like maybe that was too subtle for some people. Maybe Fight Club's too subtle for some people. But they were aware of what they were doing. And it's supposed to be a bad idea in the movie. And I think that matters because I think that you at least need to have that conversation.
There's an episode of Mad Men where they some of the older ad execs perform a minstrel show because they always have. And this is 1960 in the show or whatever. And it's well handled because they point out within the context of how that show is, pointing out the differences between that time and this time.
Right.
And people then being uncomfortable with it.
Yes. I got into it. And here's why I think it's important. I think it's very important because here's the alternate way. People miss stuff like this when in our sort of bubbled off social media world. I got into an argument with this is actually still the same kind of censorship. I got into an argument with a guy earlier this week. I won't mention his name, doesn't matter. But he was complaining about the as we tape this is also the same week that they've decided to discontinue the brand of Aunt Jemima because Aunt Jemima, for people who don't know, is based on a racist minstrel song that they named their syrup brand after. And if you're going to write in and say, no, but she was the first black millionaire. No, do some more Googling. She wasn't. Nancy Green was not the first black millionaire. Nancy Green was a former slave that they hired to play a character based on racism. But her family wants to keep around. No, that's the third Aunt Jemima because all black people were interchangeable. So when Nancy Green just died, they just replaced her with another random black woman. This person said, well, but it makes sense because Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben are in period appropriate clothing for their times and it was acceptable. I was like, no, Aunt Jemima syrup started in 1889, 20 something years after slavery had ended. And it was racist then. And Uncle Ben started in 1946, 80 years after slavery had ended and was dressed like a slave. So no, it's not what you think. This was not period appropriate. And I pointed out people have been because he said, well, it's just liberal nonsense because, it's just because of these riots and stuff. That's the only reason anybody cares. And I was like, people have been protesting Aunt Jemima since she's existed. And his answer was, well, I've never heard anybody protest it before. And I'm like, that's the problem. You've never heard anybody protest it before. That doesn't mean it's not happening. He's like, and then he's like, well, I did a Google search. I can't find anything. I'm like, to me, this just makes you sound stupid. Like if you've done a Google search, like search harder, because if you can't find out that people have had problems with a mammy character before last week, then either your Google is broken or you didn't try very hard. But like if you erase, or
your Google is heavily white.
Yeah,
I mean, and this is at some point we need an episode on how algorithms contribute to social bias. But
he's not. But I do believe him when he said, "Well, I've never heard anybody protest Aunt Jemima before." Yeah, you very well might not have, and that's kind of a problem. And I think that I think that if you have conversations about, and it's hard because I can't force people to have a conversation every time they watch a piece of media, and there are going to be people who watch. There's good people who there are going to be people who watch All in the Family and just think it's hilarious that Archie is so racist because being racist is funny. And, those people are idiots. But All in the Family was an important show because it was a show about how Archie is always wrong. Like that. I mean, at least his attitude is like, now what was great about All in the Family is Archie is still a loving father. He's a good family man. He's just racist and misogynist because people are complex. And that's what made that show interesting. And I think that just kind of saying, oh, well, we shouldn't watch this anymore is, I think, hard and problematic and sort of, gets people. We talked about Hattie McDaniel in Gone with the Wind. She's the first person of color, period, to win an Oscar. And that matters. And she won it for playing a slave because that was the role available to her. And at the time, Black people were super proud of her. They also soon afterwards said, well, how come she keeps playing these slaves again? Because she's playing essentially the same character in Song of the South that she played in Gone with the Wind, because they wouldn't give her any other roles for the next 10 years other than playing a mammy. Like that's what she got. And so I think that having those discussions is important. And I don't know how to force people to have them other than to make the media available and have people like us just scream about it. Well, let's talk about this all the time, Yeah,
I think that the thing that we can't resolve is, I think that if you watch media in a vacuum and you don't think very deeply about what you're watching or reading or listening to, it can reinforce your worldview in negative ways you might not necessarily even want, but it happens. But the question is, how do you not watch things in a vacuum? And how do you train people to not watch things in a vacuum? And how do you, do it in a way that doesn't perpetuate harm?
If someone would give me a job teaching and then force everybody to take my class, that would be,
Yeah, I mean,
that's the answer.
That's the thing is, it's the people that I know in my life, either who've been to college or not, are people whom on the one either went to college and this was part of their curriculum, i.e., I think most of the people on this podcast, or they're people, especially the people in my extended family, like some of whom never graduated high school, were people for whom this was a normal practice in their family. Like you would watch a movie and you'd sit around drinking tea and, eating cookies and just talk about the movie for another 2 hours because what else are you going to do? And I think that's the two things. It's you either learn it from people around you or you have to learn it from an education system. And as much as I joke about the weird boob thing from my high school, thinking critically about media was actually, I had a couple of teachers throughout my education that were pretty, let's go with intense about making you think critically about media. I was introduced to reading Holocaust narratives when I was in the 3rd grade. And I still remember that as one of the more and I think a lot of teachers pushed back against that of why are you there's a book called Kinderlager, which is about the children's concentration camp. And we read those in 3rd and 4th grade, and the teacher got into a lot of heat from parents. But I still remember that as one of the most formative parts of my education, because it's not only because we were learning about something very important, but also because it was one of the few times in my elementary education that a teacher took us seriously as somebody who could actually think.
I think we read Eli Wiesel's Night in 4th grade.
Right. And I think there are so many other, I think so often in my primary education, and I'm sure I'm not unique in this, because of the way that American education systems are heavily codified and teachers have a lot of limitations on what they can and cannot teach, i.e. censorship, whether it's, under that rubric or not, teacher's ability to actually treat you like a thinking person is really limited.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a big problem, because it's like if you're not going to teach, from children on up, like how to have conversation, like civil and like intellectual conversation about difficult subjects, it's like you're never going to learn it, because by the time you get to college, in my experience, most of the students who aren't habituated to that probably won't be, because
your brain's cooked by then.
They're not socialized and intellectually equipped for it.
Well, on that cheery note,
I told you this was going to be a fun episode.
Well,
You're talking about blurry boobs. That's comparatively. Since coronavirus happened, it's blurry boobs are like pretty. That's pretty on the levity scale.
I do think I think Kathy is right. We sort of resolved something, which is watch stuff and talk about it. I think again,
listen to Fox Podcast.
A little bit of critical thinking, a little bit of conversation with other people doing critical thinking.
Well, so is my family that weird? Because I don't think we are, right? Like, again, I watched Roots with my mom when I was little, when I was 2. But like things that you probably commonly consider racist. My mother, again, talking to her about last night when I was telling her that we were going to do the show today, she said, "Oh, you should talk about Little Rascals." My mom's a huge Little Rascals fan, our gang. And going back as early as like the 70s, they removed the Yum Yum Eat 'em Up episode from the syndication package of Little Rascals. And my mother spent years tracking it down. And I think it's actually called The Borneo Kid, or The Kid from Borneo. But it's basically they meet an African native who is a massively horrible stereotype of what a savage is, and that's why it was removed. So this is the 70s it was removed, and they just felt this is too offensive to put on a children's program, and so people sort of forget about it, and you end up with people who think racism just ended one day in 1955 when Martin Luther King had a dream. Like, people just think that was the end of it because we've removed all the relics of it bad enough they weren't noticing at the time. My grandfather was a big fan of Amos and Andy, which I think, Katya, when you and I met, we met in a class about classic television where I talked about that. And it's sort of weird because, I'm a black guy and you're like, oh, this is supposed to be racist. But you have to understand, when Amos and Andy was actually on television, Ebony and Jet magazine used to like run a feature in their magazine of tune into these channels. This is where all the black people are on this week, because there were so few black outlets on television that Amos and Andy, this show based on a minstrel concept the original radio show was white people portraying black people. When they brought it to television, the people who owned the show had the intelligence to go, no, we're not doing blackface for this. We're going to hire actual black guys to play these characters. And they are buffoons in a lot of ways, but it was the outlet for black people on television. So to my grandfather, this was just nostalgia.
Than just this is racist.
Yeah, and it's important.
Tons of Warner Brothers cartoons. Mm-hmm. Same kind of thing. That I remember seeing a couple of them when I was young, but then they disappeared. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that erasing of the sins of the past doesn't necessarily help the future.
So you have to find a way to talk about it, which, everyone subscribe to Vox Podcast on iTunes.
And we'll talk about it for you.
Not that we're the only show. I like our show, but there are places like our show does this. Our friends at Protagonist do this, right? This is a thing that it's what the humanities are for. Like Hannah said, it's, having these conversations, these complicated conversations, rather than just let's like close our eyes and stick our fingers in our ears, I think is important.
Yay!
Yeah.
Anyway, we should end the show. So,
so we resolved nothing. The end.
Yeah, or something. I don't know.
Or something.
Disney did resolve that there's going to only be one F word in
Hamilton.
In Hamilton. But Lin-Manuel Miranda said, that's fine. Your kids already know the lyrics. So.
Yeah, he actually said, just play the, he actually said something like, turn the sound down and then just play the album and like along with it, it'd be fine. So,
Hannah. Then album sales will go up. Be great.
Yeah. where can people find you?
Yes. Really just here, but I guess you can follow me on Twitter at Hanley Rogers. Still not tweeting, still don't care.
You can find me on Instagram at just that nerd kid. Haven't been posting a lot because in quarantine there's nothing to do. So
you moved across country. That's doing something.
That's true. I have been learning the local flavors of ice cream that are available and where to get good ramen. So that's exciting.
And Wayne.
I'm still doing photography stuff on my Instagram, so I'll pipe that up this time. It's TETROC 2017. Tetroc 2017. You want to see the random pictures I'm taking while out walking.
And you can follow me on Twitter. Mostly I'm yelling at Trump a lot. That's just been like he says stupid stuff and I yell back at him. It's amusing. Gets me through the day. You can also follow my blog at www.chrismaverick.com. You can follow the show on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, all the places at Vox Popcast. You can also follow the show now on YouTube. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We need more subscribers. There's very few people there. Right now, I'm putting all the new shows up as they air, or usually the day after they show up as an audio podcast. They show up on the YouTube feed. And then a couple times a week after that, I put up an old show. I'm sort of working our way back through our back catalog. And they're neat because depending on what we're talking about, it might just be just the audio. But sometimes when we're talking about video clips, I go there and I sort of insert little bits so that you can see what we're talking about while you're listening. So go through, subscribe to that, like and subscribe and make us popular because, you know, 2 of us are still unemployed and we want to be monetized. That's why. It does really help. Subscribe to us on iTunes or Stitcher or Spotify or wherever the hell else you get podcasts from. And if you enjoy the show, and we certainly hope you do, leave us a 5-star review, especially on iTunes. That helps other people find the show. Especially if you don't just rate us 5 stars, but you write a little blurb about why you enjoy the show. That gooses the algorithm, moves us up the charts, makes us more popular. And again, we want to be monetized. It's what we want.
So we have like 982 followers to go. So
help me, I'm poor.
I'm pulling a number out. I'm sure it's pretty close. Far less than that.
Not much.
No.
970 something. The YouTube channel is very new. The YouTube channel is very new. So, but yes, that would definitely help us out. I would like to thank Maximilian of Thoughtform Music for our epic theme song, building ever so more epically and playing us out. I'd like to thank you at home for listening and apologize to you for not talking about whether or not Greedo shot first, because, you know, really, it wasn't worth it.
Star Wars is its own episode.
It's its own episode. But thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.
Enough is enough. I have had it with these monkey fighting snakes on this Monday to Friday plane. Everybody strap in. I'm about to open some freaking windows.